All right, let's talk week 10. Quarterback and tight end. You want to know who to start and who to sit? We got you covered. Let's go through every game and talk about who belongs in what tier. Keep in mind, you got 4 teams that will be off, and that's going to be the Browns, Packers, Raiders, and Seahawks. Let's kick it off with the must-start tier at quarterback. We got Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Jaden Daniels. And at tight end, you got George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride, Evan Ingram, or Cade Otton. You have to start them. I know you're ready to set those lineups for week 10, but first, make sure you get your NFL Pick'em set on Underdog. This week, if you sign up for the first time on Underdog, you're getting a freebie. Lamar Jackson just getting 1 yard. That's right, it's the new customer special for anybody who hasn't tried Underdog yet. All you have to do is sign up and use code ENDGAME at checkout. You get that free pick and you get a deposit match all the way up to $1,000 worth of bonus cash. So on Thursday night, Bengals taking on the Ravens. As good Lamar Jackson has been, and yeah, you got to start him. Joe Burrow's coming off a 5 touchdown performance, and now he gets the Ravens defense. What do you think?
This is the strongest of the strong starts. Outside of the no doubt must starts, Joe Burrow has to be my next highest QB. Against the Ravens, this is a smash spot. Strongest of the strong starts.
You can't put him any higher here. If you have Burrow, there's no excuse not to play him. Does the same go for Mike Gesicki at tight end, who's coming off 2 also really big games? But what if T. Higgins plays? How much of a damper does that put on him?
That's going to be the big question here, is T. Higgins. If T. Higgins plays, it certainly puts a damper, but I think he's still one of the better streaming options against the Ravens. If T. Higgins is out, he's a strong start at tight end.
And so I mentioned this on the waiver video. Even if Higgins does play, Gesicki's going to have a lot of fantasy appeal because remember, rookie tight end Eric All is done for the year. Unfortunately, ACL injury, so he's not eating into snap share anymore. Gesicki has been so good, and this Ravens defense is really that bad, even against that tight end. So I think Gesicki is still probably the best streamer that you can find out there at tight end. Now, would you go so far as to say you like Gesicki over a guy like Mark Andrews?
Definitely a letdown for Mark Andrews last week. I know it's probably tough to bench Mark Andrews, but at the same time, it's risky. I'll say he's solid this week.
I think that's fair. Definitely startable, but maybe not my favorite tight end. I might prefer Gesicki based on matchup, but there's not that many tight ends I'd put over Andrews. We can't just forget about him. So he's a solid option still. Now the Sunday slate will begin early with the Giants and the Panthers over in Europe. Let's talk Daniel Jones. Do you think he is maybe a little bit more appealing than usual because he gets to face Carolina?
Only because he gets to face Carolina. I'll say fine. You can start him in a 2 QB superflex if you need to, but that's still as high as I'm going to go.
I will say superflex, yeah, you can start Daniel Jones. You really shouldn't need him as a streamer because there's really not that many quarterbacks that you were relying on in a single QB league where you should have to go that far. He's not going to be the worst streaming option, but for now, let's just say super flex only. Now, I do want to talk about Theo Johnson, rookie tight end for the Giants. He's been coming on lately and had a nice game, especially the target share was there. Is this a start of something, or you think it was just kind of an outlier?
It could be the start of something, or it could be an outlier. I think it's too soon for me to put Theo Johnson in any lineups. I'm going to avoid him this week.
Trying to stream a tight end, I don't think he's the worst option. So I had talked about him previously. But he's also not the best option. So if all the other tight ends out there, like Gesicki or some others, are not available, you could do worse. Now on the Carolina side, we got Bryce Young, who's running out of options and receivers to throw to. But what do you think Bryce Young does in this matchup?
I mean, how good can you ever feel about Bryce Young? Even last week in that fantastic matchup, gave you very little in fantasy. I'm avoiding Bryce Young.
I think we still have to avoid Bryce Young and mostly this Carolina passing offense. Although I do have to talk about Jatavian Sanders because he was the leading receiver for the Panthers last week, not Jalen Coker. Is this rookie tight end more appealing?
I think he is a little bit more appealing. In 3 of the games with Bryce Young, he's gotten a pretty decent target share and been involved. So he's very, very risky, but if you're desperate in a deep tight end league, I guess you could do worse than streaming him.
Well, he's getting targets, but again, this matchup is not going to be as good. The Giants are somewhat tough against tight ends. Remember, last week it was the Saints. So I'll actually say I prefer Theo Johnson to JT Sanders. I'll probably just avoid Sanders this week. Patriots at the Bears. We got 2 rookie quarterbacks here. Let's start with Drake May. He did a lot on the grounds, but not a lot through the air last week. What does he do this week?
Probably will have to do a lot on the ground and not much through the air again against this Bears defense. And really, if it wasn't for that miracle play at the end of the game, what did you really get from Drake May in fantasy? Even with that miracle play, what did you really get from Drake May last week? 2 QB Superflex only.
Yeah, Superflex, he is an option because those rushing yards are more valuable than the passing yards. It's not a good spot on the road against Chicago, but in Superflex, he is an option. Is Hunter Henry an option? He went back to being, the most productive receiver in New England for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, he's always got potential with Drake May. Not a great spot here, but again, as a streaming option, he's fine.
That's pretty much Hunter Henry. It's fine if you need a streamer. Caleb Williams has not looked fine. A lot of issues there in Chicago. Is Caleb Williams going to take a step forward or kind of more of the same this week?
I'm just going to say more of the same. I mean, maybe he'll take a step forward, and at some point in some games here, he probably will take a step forward, but this doesn't feel like that game. The Patriots, I'm going to avoid Caleb Williams this week.
Probably going to be a little bit more defense-oriented game, slow pace, not a lot of points. I really don't want to play Caleb Williams if I don't have to. Although we'll say if it's a 2 QB league, he's not going to be your worst option. And so what do we do with a guy like Cole Kmet, who has some spikes in value in fantasy production, but also some absolute zeros?
Yes, absolute zero like he gave you last week. I cannot trust Cole Kmet. Maybe this is the week where he scores a touchdown, but maybe it's another week where he gets you nothing. I'm avoiding Cole Kmet.
Agree. Don't feel great about the passing game in general. I think we can do better at tight end, so let's avoid Kmet this week. 49ers coming off of their bye week. Let's see what Brock Purdy we get. It hasn't been that good in previous weeks, but now he gets the Tampa secondary. What does that mean?
You got to feel good about Brock Purdy this week against Tampa Bay. Just made Patrick Mahomes look like, Patrick Mahomes back in the day. 3 touchdowns. He's still got Debo. He's got Kittle. He might have CMC back this week, which I think is huge for him. I'm going to say Brock Purdy is a strong start this week.
All the weapons are finally coming back. Well, not Brandon Ayuk, but everybody else is going to be there. Yeah, this Tampa team is struggling, especially in the secondary. You've got to take advantage of this matchup. Purdy, a strong start. And Baker Mayfield, he struggled predictably against a tough Chiefs defense. Does he bounce back here?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't terrible. He didn't have his biggest game, but he wasn't terrible. I think he can at least be okay again this week. Maybe there's a chance he gets Evans back. Probably not, but even still, I'm going to say Baker's a solid start this week.
If Mike Evans comes back or whenever that happens, I can go back to saying Mayfield is a solid start, but still not a great matchup. He just doesn't have the weapons. I don't think it's his fault, but yeah, I don't think the upside is there as long as Evans is out. So I'll say right now, really more just a super flex option for me. Broncos taking on the Chiefs. All right, Bo Nix, maybe the hype train is slowing down a little bit. Is it going to come to a halt in Arrowhead?
This is a very tough spot against the Chiefs. Last week had a great spot and did very little, but he does run. He has been okay. I can't say outright avoid Bo Nix. I'll just say one of my least favorite 2 QB Superflex options.
There's enough bad quarterbacks in the NFL these days and enough, teams on bye this week. Yeah, you're probably going to be able to put him in a Superflex 2 QB league, but that's it. Now, Pat Mahomes, looking like vintage Mahomes, was that really more just a matter of the matchup, and is that going to reverse course this week?
Probably going to reverse course a little bit this week going against the Broncos, but I still think Patrick Mahomes is more than a 2 QB Superflex option, so I think he's one of your better streaming options in a 1 QB league.
I'm going to go a little bit higher here. I'll say he should be solid because I don't think it was just the Bucs defense. I mean, surely that was a big part of it, but he has a legit receiver now. DeAndre Hopkins, we saw that connection with Kelsey actually looking like Travis Kelsey and DeAndre Hopkins looking like vintage D-Hop. Yeah, I think he can do something against this Broncos defense. I think he's at least solid. Now, hopefully this video helps you with all your start-sit decisions, but if you still have questions for start-sit, waiver wire trades, or anything fantasy football related, use the Draft Lane app because that connects you directly with Chris and myself for all your fantasy football needs. Download it for free right now. Bills at the Colts. Josh Allen still more than solid. Dalton Kincaid, look, he got a ton of targets. It's just still the connection doesn't seem to be there.
Yeah, Kincaid right now is just living in that streaming tier for me. I mean, probably one of your stronger streamers. Like if you're looking at him or guys like Hunter Henry, I'm taking Kincaid, but still just a streamer for me.
Target share usually is a good predictor of fantasy value, but in this case, it really hasn't been. And what if Amari Cooper does play and come back? Yeah, a streamer, and that's it. And the Bills defense is going to get to face off against Joe Flacco. Once again, still the quarterback there. Is he going to be the quarterback for any of your fantasy teams?
No chance. I cannot believe this guy is starting another game. This is an easy avoid.
It's not a good spot for him. It was a great spot last week. It should have been a big game for the passing attack in Indy, and it wasn't. I mean, come on, against the Bills here, I would say you should probably avoid Flacco, but also let's take it a step further. Early in the week right now, Joe Flacco's line is 222 passing yards, 22 and a half to be exact. Let's go lower than that. Look, he didn't even get close to that against the Vikings, which give up a ton to quarterbacks in terms of yardage. And now the Bills on the very flip side here defensively. I'm taking the lower. Chris, I know you agree with that. And we definitely both agree you should take that free pick if you haven't tried underdog yet. Lamar Jackson just getting 1 yard. Take the higher on that. Take the Flacco pick or any other pick that you like. And if you use code ENDGAME when you check out for the very first time, you also get deposit match up to $1,000 worth of bonus cash. It's a good time to try underdog if you haven't yet. Now let's talk Steelers at the Commanders. Still Russ in charge there. An improving Commanders defense that just added Marshawn Lattimore. How worried are you about Russ?
I'm a little worried about Russ, but at the same time, I never feel great about Russ. I think he's more than a 2 QB superflex option, but not your best option in a 1 QB league. But if you need to, you could stream him.
At least he can get you some points in a superflex league. So I'll put him there. On the road against Washington, don't feel great about it. Well, I mean, technically the Steelers did add a weapon as well with Mike Williams for whatever that's worth. I mean, that's not going to make me too more encouraged about Russ. He's a superflex option, and that's it. So what about Pat Freiermuth at tight end?
He's fine. That's all I can ever say about him. He could score, he could not. Not the best streaming option, but not the worst.
That's about all we can say about him, huh? He's a streamer if you don't have anything that's more appealing on the waiver wire. Zach Ertz, he's at least been consistent and solid. What do you think going against this version of the Steel Curtain?
Not a great matchup for him, but he should get you some points. He's one step above Pat Freiermuth as a streamer this week.
Yeah, that's fair. A little bit higher end streaming option this week. I think that's about right. Vikings at the Jaguars. Let's talk Sam Darnold. Had a pretty good game in week 9, and now he gets the Jaguars. So how high are you on him?
I'm not going to go overboard here with Sam Darnold, but you got to feel pretty good about him against the Jaguars. I think he's a solid start this week.
I'll keep him in the solids here. I want to go higher, but still. I think there are enough quarterbacks that I can put ahead of Darnold. I won't go too crazy here. I mean, on paper, it's a great matchup. But then again, maybe they don't have to throw the ball all that much. So I will say Darnold is probably my favorite if he's out there on waiver wires and you need a quarterback because Jordan Love is on bye, then stream. Then he's my favorite of those picks. All right, TJ Hawkinson, not too involved last week as we predicted. So what about him in week 10?
He may get more involved. All that talk about no snap count, and then I think he played less than half the snaps. So, yeah, he's coming off ACL injury. It's a devastating knee injury. I'm still avoiding TJ Hawkinson.
Let's give him some time here. Last week was too soon. This week might still be too soon. So let's just go avoid. And Trevor Lawrence, well, on the one hand, he does get the Vikings defense, but on the other hand, it's still Trevor Lawrence.
Hey, don't sleep on Trevor Lawrence. He's actually been pretty good in fantasy recently. Not in real life, but in fantasy. And this isn't a bad matchup. I think you could stream Trevor Lawrence this week.
I guess you can stream him. It's really aggravating. I mean, sure, he ran in those 2 touchdowns because can't let anybody else have any fun. And it's really annoying, but I guess he's a streamer. Falcons at the Saints. Let's talk Kirk Cousins. He's already been solid, and now he gets to face this Saints defense that is having a fire sale.
Has to be a strong start. I mean, I'd like him a lot more if Drake London plays, but even if Drake London is out, I don't even think I care. It's strong start.
Very, very strong start. My only concern here is that maybe they just don't have to pass the ball that much, but still, if you got Cousins, you got to feel great. Do you feel great about Kyle Pitts, though?
Had a letdown last week, but again, this is the Saints, and they might not have Drake London. I think Kyle Pitts this week has to be at least a solid start, maybe even strong start.
Yeah, well, this does depend. If London doesn't play, I think you got to consider Pitts a strong start. He'll soak up some of those targets, you would think. It's a great spot now. But for now, let's just say he's at least a high-end solid tier tight end. Well, one guy who's still left in New Orleans, it's the quarterback Derek Carr. All right, talk to me about Carr.
What is there to say here? A terrible team, terrible offensive line, nobody to throw the football to. You cannot start Derek Carr.
No, I'm wondering if Derek Carr will honestly ever be startable again in fantasy football. So this week, at least, let's say no. Now, maybe, just maybe, we could say yes to a Saint. That's Taysom Hill. I mean, he's probably going to have to do something at every position at this point.
Exactly. I'm not going to go crazy with Taysom Hill here, but I think Taysom Hill at tight end is at least a solid start this week.
Right, and that's the key. I'm glad you said at tight end, not at quarterback. That's getting way too crazy. At tight end, he's a streaming option like always. You think Juwan Johnson might be kind of the sneaky beneficiary here of Olave being out, Shaheed being out, everybody being out?
Maybe, but very sneaky, like a streaming option, but a deep streaming option.
Pretty deep. I'll just say I'd rather take chances elsewhere than with the Saints offense because he's still pretty much touchdown or bust. I'm going to probably avoid Juwan Johnson this week. Next, we got the Titans at the Chargers. It's probably going to be Mason Rudolph back again as the starting quarterback here on the road against the Bolts. What do you think?
I think I'm not starting Mason Rudolph anyway. I mean, how does it feel putting Mason Rudolph in your fantasy lineup? Even like it cannot feel good. I'm avoiding.
Yeah, and this is also a good time to remind you all, if you play in a super flex league, you don't have to super flex a quarterback. And if Mason Rudolph is my only choice, I'll just say no and start a receiver. Now let's talk Justin Herbert going against that Titans defense. They are passing the ball a little bit more. What do you think he can do in this matchup?
Exactly. Chargers have started to become a pass-first team all of a sudden, and he's got weapons now, right? Johnston healthy, maybe DJ Chark back this week, Palmer, Ladd. I think Justin Herbert, not my favorite streamer in a 1QB league this week, but I think he's streamable.
The Titans still do have a pretty tough pass defense. I know they just lost Condre Diggs, but still they have some good corners there. It's an okay matchup. I'll just put him as a super flex option. And the tight end there is still Will Dissly. Well, that target share kind of fell off last week. Is he still an option?
With all the receivers back, yeah, really fell off last week. Not starting Will Dissly.
Yeah, I think his 15 minutes are up. You can avoid Dissly. Jets at the Cardinals. All right, let's talk Aaron Rodgers. Coming off a pretty good game, statistically. Can he keep it going against the Cards?
He could. This is a good matchup for him, but I'm always leery of saying start Aaron Rodgers in a 1QB league, even though I know he did have a nice game last week. I'm going to keep him in the 2QB superflex range, but the higher end of that range.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. You know, the Cardinals it's not a great matchup. It's not a bad matchup. It's kind of in between. Makes me feel like this is not going to be a pass-heavy approach from the Jets. I think he's streamable, but he's not going to be my favorite streamer. Is Tyler Conklin of the Jets a streamable tight end?
Not for me. You're just really hoping for a touchdown here. I'm going to avoid Tyler Conklin.
Yeah, with Wilson and now Adams firmly securing a bunch of targets, there's not a whole lot left for Conklin. You can avoid him. And what about Kyler Murray? Everybody's just waiting for him to flop once again so they can bench him, cut him, whatever. Are you still in on Kyler Murray?
I'm still in on him enough, but this is not a great spot against the Jets. But he can always run, and every time people are like, that's it, I'm done with Kyler Murray, it feels like that's the week where he throws for 300 yards or rips off a 60-yard touchdown. But that being said, it's a tough matchup. I'm only going to put him in the streaming option this week.
Yeah, I mean, the Jets defense, like I said, hasn't been dominant, but they're still pretty good, and Kyler Murray has definitely not been dominant. So, this week I might drop him down to the super flex range. All right, Eagles at the Cowboys. Thought this might have been a key divisional matchup, but now it looks like maybe not a very good matchup at all. Look, might be good for Dallas Goedert, but is he even going to play? And if so, how good do you feel about him?
I feel okay about him. He should be involved. We're still not sure about A.J. Brown. I mean, it sounds like he's going to play, but there's a chance he doesn't. So I'll say Dallas Goedert a streaming option in this matchup.
Streaming option, definitely would feel better about him if AJB doesn't go, but I don't see that happening. Yeah, a low-end streamer. And the Cowboys did make one change, and that's putting Dak Prescott probably on the IR. He's definitely not playing this week, so it's Cooper Rush. Cooper Rush have any interest in fantasy?
No chance here. I mean, I don't. What do you hope? You're hoping for like extreme garbage time and just a couple garbage time touchdowns? You can't start Cooper Rush.
Look, he's not the worst backup quarterback out there, but this Cowboys offense is pretty much broken. Cooper Rush, you can just avoid him. So, big question, I think, is what does this mean for Jake Ferguson? He had been a solid start week after week. Does he fall down a notch?
He has to. Plus a tough matchup against this Eagles secondary. Very strong against tight ends. I think you got to bump him down to just a streamer. Maybe one of the higher end streamers still, but just a streamer.
Yeah, he still wound up getting some receptions and yards last week. But like you said, you can't feel great. So, agree, a high-end streamer. Now we got the Lions taking on the Texans on the road. Is this going to be a good game for Jared Goff?
I'm not sure. This is a tough one to figure out because the Texans, I mean, look, they just got torched by Aaron Rodgers, but they still have a decent defense, I guess. And the Lions could always get into those games where they just run the ball so much and don't need to do anything. But I still think Jared Goff is a solid start.
Yeah, I feel like Jared Goff is getting a little bit too much hype early in the year. I mean, sure, the Lions keep winning. It's not because he's putting up tremendous numbers. So he's always a good streaming option. This week, I'll just keep him there as a streamer. Sam Laporta, not a great option last week. Does he bounce back this week?
Probably not. I mean, the whole hope, no Jameson Williams. Yeah, like let's not forget his one big game was a touchdown from the running back, David Montgomery. That is never happening again. Maybe in his entire career, let's be honest. So barely a streaming option, and I really want to just say avoid on it. You know what? I'm avoiding Sam Laporta.
And I can't just outright avoid him. He's still in a really good offense, but I also can't say more than a streamer, so keep him in that tier. And CJ Stroud, maybe, hopefully for his sake, gets Nico Collins back. So how do you feel about Stroud, either with or without Nico?
He's at home. It's the Lions. They don't have the best secondary. I'll say higher end of the 2 QB superflex here.
I really think Nico's going to make a huge difference here. And the Lions do give up points to quarterbacks and receivers. So high-end streamer for now based on what we know. And let's finish the week with the Dolphins at the Rams on Monday night. Let's talk Tua. Look, he's been okay the last couple weeks since coming back. I don't think he's the main problem there in Miami, among other things. What do you think about him for fantasy?
I actually like him this week. We just saw like Geno Smith and JSN just torch this secondary. Why can't Tua, Tyreek Hill, and Devon Achane do the same thing? I'm going to put him as a streamer this week in a 1 QB league.
Can't put him as more than a streamer until we see this Dolphins offense finally start to click. I do feel much better about this matchup, but I don't feel great about it. So I'll say streaming option. Now, Jonnu Smith has maintained his involvement in this offense. Is it enough to make him a streamer in fantasy?
I think so. It's not a terrible matchup for him this week. And again, the way you beat this Rams team right now is to throw the football. So he's a streamer.
He's a decent streamer. Maybe not the highest ceiling out of all the tight ends out there, but then again, we're talking tight ends, so he's an option. And then Matt Stafford got his receivers back. Let's hope they both stay on the field all game long. Against this Dolphins defense, where would you rank Stafford?
Can't rank him too high this week. Liked him last week in that matchup. This is a tougher matchup. The Dolphins secondary has been good, so I'm going to say again, just a streaming option this week.
Right, because the Dolphins are to some extent kind of a run funnel defense. It wasn't a good Kyren week last week. It should be a better game for him. So Stafford is, I'd say, a low-end streamer. If you didn't catch our other start set videos or any of the other great content we put out for you every single week, check out the Week 10 playlist with everything you need to win.